There is no single sleep position that doctors warn every adult to avoid. The evidence is much more specific, and that makes the real answer stronger than the clickbait version. If the question is everyday neck and back comfort, stomach sleeping is usually the position clinicians discourage most often, but that is only one part of the map. Back sleeping can be the bigger problem for obstructive sleep apnea. Right-side sleeping can worsen reflux, and late pregnancy back sleeping raises a separate medical concern. So the most accurate opening is not that one position is evil. It is that different bodies run into different risks in different positions. For healthy adults with no major medical issues, position matters less than social media often claims, which is why blanket statements usually collapse under closer medical scrutiny. Sleep specialists tend to care more about position when age, pain, reflux, pregnancy, heavy snoring, or sleep-disordered breathing enter the picture. That is why back sleeping is always best, and stomach sleeping is always dangerous. Both oversimplify a condition-specific medical question. If we narrow the question to ordinary musculoskeletal problems, stomach sleeping, also called prone sleeping, is the most commonly discouraged position. The reason starts with the neck. Prone sleepers usually keep the head rotated to one side for hours, which can create sustained stress through the cervical spine. The lower back can also be pushed into extension in prone sleeping, especially if the mattress and pillow setup do not support a more neutral posture. Many stomach sleepers also put one or both arms overhead or tuck an arm awkwardly under the pillow, which can add shoulder strain and nerve irritation. Across a full night, that combination can show up as morning neck stiffness, low back discomfort, shoulder irritation, headaches, or numbness, and tingling from awkward positioning. Research reviews on sleep posture and spinal symptoms suggest side lying is generally more protective than prone sleeping, even though the evidence is not strong enough for absolute claims. That distinction matters because medical caution is not the same as saying the position is automatically damaging for every person every night. Some adults sleep on their stomach for years and report no major symptoms, no headaches, no stiff neck, and no low back pain when they wake up. For those people, the position is not automatically catastrophic. It is simply less ergonomic and more likely to provoke strain over time. The warning becomes more relevant when someone already has recurring morning neck pain, shoulder discomfort, low back stiffness, or headaches after sleep. In that situation, prone sleeping is not just a habit. It becomes a plausible mechanical contributor that is worth changing before chasing more dramatic explanations. Back sleeping or supine sleeping has a much more complicated profile than its clean reputation suggests. For some people with low back pain, back sleeping can actually help because body weight is distributed more symmetrically and a neutral line is easier to support. Some back sleepers also like the fact that the face is not pressed into the pillow and the shoulders are not compressed the way they often are in side sleeping. But the same position becomes a major issue in sleep-disordered breathing, especially in people with heavy snoring or obstructive sleep apnea. When someone with positional sleep apnea lies on their back, the tongue and jaw can fall backward and narrow the airway during sleep. That is why sleep specialists often warn those patients specifically about supine sleeping, even if a healthy adult without airway problems tolerates it perfectly well. Evidence reviews on positional therapy show that reducing supine sleep can improve measures such as the apnea-hypopnea index in positional sleep apnea. Even so, continuous positive airway pressure remains more effective overall, which means side sleeping is helpful, but not always the full solution. This is the point where the idea of one universal worst position really breaks apart. For a person with neck pain, prone sleeping may be the bigger problem. For a person with positional sleep apnea, the back may be the real problem. For a person with reflux, the key issue may not be back versus stomach at all, but left side versus right side. Acid reflux and gastroesophageal reflux disease offer one of the clearest examples of why position advice has to be specific. Current evidence suggests that left side sleeping reduces nocturnal reflux compared with right side sleeping and compared with lying flat on the back. A recent systematic review and meta-analysis found that left lateral sleeping reduced acid exposure time and acid clearance time relative to right lateral or supine positions. The evidence base is still limited, and some of the studies are small, but the direction of the finding is consistent enough to matter in practice. Medical guidance for reflux also goes beyond side choice. Patients are often advised not to eat for at least 2 to 3 hours before lying down. They are also commonly told to elevate the head of the bed by about 6 to 10 inches because torso elevation helps more than ordinary pillows. Ordinary pillows often bend the neck without lifting the upper body enough, while a proper wedge or raised bed frame changes the angle more effectively. So if reflux is the problem, the real warning is often against right-side sleeping or flat sleeping after a late meal, not against sleep position in general. Pregnancy creates another entirely different decision tree, and this is where sensational language can do real harm if it ignores the actual nuance. Older public advice often reduced the message to sleep on your left side, but the evidence-based version is more precise than that. Large prospective data through about 30 weeks of gestation did not find that sleeping on the back or right side increased stillbirth, growth restriction, or hypertensive disorders earlier on. The stronger concern appears in late pregnancy, especially after 28 weeks, when going to sleep flat on the back has been linked with a higher risk of late stillbirth. The leading physiological explanation is compression of major blood vessels by the enlarged uterus, which may reduce venous return and uteroplacental blood flow. That is why public health messages in several settings encourage pregnant women from around 28 weeks onward to go to sleep on their side. Both sides are generally considered acceptable, even though the left side is still often favored in popular advice and older recommendations. A pregnant person who wakes up on their back after falling asleep on their side should not be thrown into panic by that fact alone. The main emphasis is on the going to sleep position and on making side sleeping the default in late pregnancy, not on treating every unplanned movement as an emergency. Researchers also caution that some of the most alarming associations come from observational and case control data, so recall bias and confounding still matter. That is why the evidence should be explained calmly. Important enough to change behavior, but not in a way that terrifies people unnecessarily. Research on neck and back pain also warns against overconfident internet language. A scoping review on sleep posture and nonspecific spinal symptoms suggested that side lying, especially supported side lying, seemed generally protective. But those studies were few, often small, and sometimes depended on self-reported posture rather than objective overnight measurement. So a viral claim like, "this one position is destroying your spine," runs ahead of what the data can honestly support. There are also less urgent but still real issues attached to sleep position, especially facial compression, shoulder loading, and hip discomfort. Side and stomach sleeping can leave sleep creases on the face, while side sleeping can aggravate shoulder pain if the arm is trapped underneath the body. Hip discomfort can build during side sleeping too, especially when there is no support between the knees to reduce rotational stress. That is why pillow strategy matters almost as much as the base position itself. A pillow between the knees can help side sleepers reduce twisting at the hips and lower back, and a supportive neck pillow can help back sleepers keep alignment. Stomach sleepers, who cannot switch immediately, sometimes reduce strain with a thinner head pillow or a small pillow under the pelvis. That is usually a compromise rather than an ideal long-term solution, but it can reduce some of the extension and neck rotation while habits are changing. One of the biggest sources of confusion in this whole discussion is that infant advice is completely different from adult advice. For infants under 1 year of age, prone sleeping is strongly discouraged because it increases the risk of sleep-related infant death. Babies should be placed on their backs for every sleep, and side sleeping is not recommended for them either. That is a very strong safety recommendation, and it should never be muddled with adult discussions where back sleeping may worsen apnea or snoring. In infants, back sleeping is the life-saving recommendation. In some adults, back sleeping is the position that worsens airway collapse. Those are different physiological worlds. So the most accurate answer to the title is this: stomach sleeping is probably the position doctors most often discourage for average adults with neck or back concerns. But that answer is only partly true unless it is followed immediately by the rest of the map. Doctors also warn many sleep apnea patients about back sleeping. Reflux guidance favors left side sleeping over right side or flat positions, and late pregnancy changes the advice again. The honest conclusion is not a single villainous position. It is a set of trade-offs shaped by symptoms, anatomy, pregnancy status, and airway risk. If your problem is general spinal comfort, prone sleeping is usually the first position worth questioning. If your problem is apnea, the back may be worse. If your problem is reflux, left side sleeping usually beats right side or flat sleeping. If your problem is late pregnancy, side sleeping becomes the safer default. And if the sleeper is an infant, the answer changes completely. Back sleeping is the standard recommendation, and stomach sleeping is not advised. That is what the medical evidence actually supports. Not one universal enemy, but a body-specific map of which positions become risky under which conditions. If you want the follow-up, the next useful question is not which position looks best online, but how pillows, mattress setup, and symptom patterns change the answer in real life.